when I was putting the slides together, the Open Power Foundation does have this like a power simulator which references Mambo, so I'm not sure if it's kind of come back full circle with this or not. But like in terms of IBM, it's just everything is gone from the site. So like you can't even find the documentation for this architecture anymore, which is a bit crap really. If you're just starting out and you just want to play, it's you don't really have much resources. It's like an uphill battle just as your first step. And we had, besides like this weird configuration file, which is of no use for anybody starting out, we also had like drivers like this Mac Open Firmware console, which I guess tied in with the system simulator. We ended up dropping it because in reality, actually, you couldn't boot or build a kernel with it enabled. Another thing that kind of Macallan does is look after various graphics card drivers in our thing. And the significance of the Radeon FB is that it's ubiquitous among the Apple hardware, but also if it doesn't work properly, not only do you have issues getting your system to boot, but you probably won't get very far with trying to do things with X. So in this case, like with the Mac Mini, the architecture of the system, let's say there was problems with the hardware that Apple made up for in their operating system, which you end up struggling with as an open source operating system project. And in this case, I think what Apple probably ended up assuming was that you would buy yourself a shiny Apple display to run with your Mac Mini, and that's what you would use to operate it. Because when you come to plug a bargain basement cheapo DVI monitor, you find that suddenly you can't get into open firmware because the system doesn't initialize it properly, and NetBSD, the Radeon firmware driver, doesn't initialize the display properly. So yes, so that's one of the yes, Macallan has recently fixed this. So the issue was that we can't resolve the open firmware issue, so that's out of our hands. But with regards to this, it's the driver now does better detection of the resolution supported by the monitor. So we actually get one. If you can get the kernel to boot, you're likely to get a display. Another thing is also the bootloader. We had issues with various systems not being able to boot. We still can't boot on certain systems, but we've had recent changes that, thanks to UE, means that I can actually boot NetBSD on this. And also, I think UE added NetBoot support. So you can do
Add NetBoot support. The problem was that Apple firmware wants to talk BSDP, Apple's own boot something protocol on top of DHCP.
Mm-hmm.
And if your DHCP server does not talk that, the firmware will just sit there, idling without getting the bootloader. So I found several examples and just wrote that the necessary DHCP config stuff to talk manually BSDP from DHCPD. And so with those additions to the config, you can actually NetBoot can convince the firmware to talk to you.
So BSDP is essentially just DHCP with extensions.
Yeah. It uses DHCP as a transport, and it talks BSDP inside it.
Cool. Okay. So after all the hardware bits, to bring it back to our package source, what have I been doing with it? The issue is that, again, in the assumption from the Apple side is that you make up for the hardware in their software environment, which again, as a external open source project, unless you make the you cater for these assumptions, you're going to be struggling. So in this case, what they're trying to do is give you as low spec hardware as they can for the biggest markup, and then make the system responsive by changing the scheduling priority in their kernel. So your system is always responsive regardless of the system that you're running. So the GUI responds, which maybe that's not the case for your OS scheduler. And in this case, what you end up getting is like the cheapest and slowest disk, commonly like 4200 RPM IDE, and CPUs with either bugs or no level 3 cache. So this means that if you're doing like kind of bulk builds on an iMac G4, you have no L3 cache. So you end up suffering with longer build times. I'll come back to the disk thing in a second. So in this case, like trying to build packages with like pull-in boost or like Qt, that's like several days that I will end up losing. Definitely for boost, it's like 2.5, 3 days waiting time, and the Qt stuff is longer. But maybe I'm hoping that once the G5 support is there, we can turn around the packages much faster.
Package in package source right now.
Yeah.
You haven't tried K-Office. That's about the worst you can get, which takes, I think, 7 hours or so on my machine, which is like half of the total absolute build time.
Wow. All right. So we don't have a modern browser for this, but that's also kind of it's kind of a blessing, because you can turn around and it's still a pretty able hardware. It's just that the assumption of does your system have Rust support or up-to-date bleeding edge C++ support kind of hinders the ability to build modern browsers. But NetSurf kind of gets the job done if you don't need anything.
You do have modern Rust support, by the way.
For Mac PPC?
Yep.
Seriously?
Yeah, probably.
If you can wait the 2 weeks it takes to build.
If I can wait the 2 weeks for it to build?
You're not really building it. You're downloading the old binary and building a new one. But yeah, you can use it. Probably.
For Mac PPC specifically?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
For a even lighter alternative, I should share a patch to build a NetSurf with frame buffer support that will just depends on the X11 dependency without needing JTK. It is also possible. So I think that we should make several NetSurf packages.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So ignoring trying to do stuff in the web browser, actually you can do modern graphics with it. GIMP now works. Pure data works. Most of the toolchain stuff. So if you're doing kind of hardware projects and things, it's a perfectly capable machine. And it's showed up various bugs in NetBSD and elsewhere. So for the Lua device, Lua wasn't handling the case of architectures which have separate kernel and user space memory, and so you would crash the system trying to upload Lua, your Lua program. For the GIMP, thanks to Yui again, it revealed that there was issues in the way that we handled the Ultivec instructions, and I'd like to get a modern scheme going on there, but I haven't resolved this Racket one where I have some component which I'm calling into which doesn't build with symbols, so I can't track where I'm kind of getting lost. But yeah. So my wish list is to get a modern scheme on there, just so I can do kind of play around with some scheme implementations. At the moment, the only scheme that runs is the Scheme 48 from the packages that we actually support. For the faster builds, I actually just want to do away with IDE. So in NetBSD, we support the FireWire on here, and I'm thinking that I can have a modern system with fast storage, and then just use the FireWire bus for connecting these together, because I get 400 megabits at least on the FireWire bus, and I can do things with fast storage rather than trying to shoehorn a potentially expensive IDE SSD onto these. Or trying to do things with the SATA bridges, which are not that reliable anyway. So I haven't really done any of this work apart from just testing things, but like Mac Allen does a great job at being the port maintainer for the Mac PPC and all the graphics card work. Thanks to Yui for the bootloader update, because now this can boot NetBSD. And Nat for solving the audio problem and his continuing work for the audio system updates. I think there's actually a thing that's kind of pending for NetBSD 8 on a bigger scheme. All right, so let's move on to something new. There's a project from Google called Upspin, and the idea is a new way of collaborating in a secure manner, I'd say. So one of the facilities is to enable you to share files without actually ending up trusting a third party, because in most cases you end up, if you want to use a third party, you effectively entrust them with your data. Whereas actually what you'd like to do is to use them as a storage space without actually giving them access to your data. And also, when you look at, let's take the traditional means of, CIFS or NFS. With NFS, you have various problems with actually just stability, and for CIFS, that's kind of security prone. So, are you going to do that over VPN? And it soon becomes this quite rigid, quite cumbersome. The stack builds up, and there's more than one piece to it. Whereas with this, effectively, you can have a web server that's public-facing and relies on public key infrastructure to secure your data. If you don't have the key, you don't get access to the system. The other thing that it also enables you to do, besides the file sharing, is a new way to kind of work, in that you can actually have your state on the system, and you can share that state with different systems that you have access to. The example that gets given is that, let's say you're doing some work in Git, and you have some state in this checkout. If you were to switch to a different system, you would either have to push that to a server and then pull it down again, or make those files readily available on another host. Whereas on this, if you had your thing in the Upspin system, you would get the same view regardless of the system that you're on. So there's anything complicated about it in terms of dependencies. At the moment, it's been living in WIP for quite a long time, and that's only because of it doesn't behave as we expect for a Go package for it to live in package source. And that is that there's a bunch of things that it pulls in from third-party repos during the build process. And I basically haven't pulled my finger out to go and kind of change things so that it doesn't download third-party dependencies during the build and use the components that we have in package source. But I have this, and I'm using it package source on FreeBSD. to share with multiple clients on Mac OS without any issues. So the main component of it is, if you wanted to run your own instance, is this upspin server binary. And I think they kind of try to make it newcomer friendly in that it does a lot of things in the one binary. The idea being that you'd copy this binary into place and execute it, and automagically you have your own upspin instance. That is, it will talk to Let's Encrypt, fetch keys for you, get them into place, spawn a web server, and there you go. Whereas in most cases you don't want to do that. You already have a web server and you just want this binary so you can pass traffic onto it. So in my setup I end up having it running with Nginx, and it works quite well. On the actual client side, you have this upspin FS utility which talks to Fuse and exposes the file system to the host OS, so you can integrate it with your desktop environment. And I guess this is also going to be an interesting challenge for doing this on NetBSD, because from my limited knowledge, our Fuse implementation is different to other operating systems.
I think that at least Camille recently shared some patches. I don't remember the Go module, but they added support for Fuse in NetBSD too. So probably it will just work.
Oh, cool.
But it was added just recently, so 1 or 2 weeks ago. So maybe because it was relative to rclone, another Go program in some way similar. But so maybe it will work.
Okay, cool. That's great to hear. Yeah. So. I think it's interesting because it just kind of breaks away from the traditional way of kind of working with things, and that's kind of refreshing in the world of NFS and SMB and things like that. All right, so let's do something borrowed. Does anyone know who this guy is? Yeah. So I was kind of revisiting the old talks from like Andrew Tannenbaum at EuroBSDCon and things like that, and I thought I'd kind of check out the state of things over there and what have they done on their side of things with their OS. So I guess the last update that I saw was like the NetBSD source from like 2014, and for package source, they're not actually using our package source. They have their own clone of the package source repo, but it's like 2014 and then like with patches on top. I don't know what that means for the package source vulnerability file, but yeah. So I thought like maybe I can bring things forward again. Benny.
Can we maybe invite somebody from their community, whoever is doing packages, to become a developer and bring their stuff into our tree?
Right.
Who was that?
I forgot, but we can try.
How much activity is left in Minix 3?
There is, so this is also the thing about, we've been kind of talking about revision control systems for a very long time. So the idea of, in their case, their project actually has their own Git repo, which the public don't interact with, but they have a GitHub repo, which you can kind of submit pull requests to, and then somebody will do the manual lifting and put them into place. And I think there's like maybe a handful of people who are developers but like the main, there's one person who's kind of doing the moving things around. I actually thought that maybe I could do it the other way. So rather than inviting a developer from their side onto our things, just basically taking our components and pushing things back over there. In this case, like we're just about to, we've got NetBSD 8 as a branch, so maybe kind of take the things from there and see what the state of like package source is. I mean, like one thing that they ended up doing is one change that they end up making in the package source MK directory is they're just manually patching in the Minix info in the GNU config files. It's because that was never kind of updated upstream. It was, as far as the world was concerned, Minix only runs on i386. So I ended up kind of fixing that, just like kind of one email and problem solved. Yeah, I've got a couple of pull requests just to kind of bring us their /bin up to date with our /bin from like NetBSD 8. There's I think where it will get interesting as we kind of cover more parts of the system is that the things that we have with reproducible builds, because I guess nothing has been done on their side, and I'm not sure whether they want to do reproducible builds. I'm not sure if I want to work on reproducible builds, but yeah, it should be kind of fairly straightforward to kind of at least update Minix with NetBSD 8 for most things. And the other thing was actually just to see what is the state of package source in terms of what we have in our tree and how far we can get with package source on Minix. I'm not sure if anything has diverged or not. And that's as far as I got with my slides.
Any questions?
So what's the state of Minix on ARM?
I guess it's still a thing. I think that I don't know. The impression I got at the time when Andrew Tannenbaum was giving the talks was that the BeagleBone Black was the platform. But I noticed now that there is an i386 or like x86 build of Minix. So I don't know if that's been added back in or it was always the case and I was kind of oblivious to it. Do you know?
Well, I just saw the initial announcement about the BeagleBoard support, but
yeah,
no
yeah.
for the commits.
And actually, it's not only there's the support for the BeagleBone Black, which was what Tannenbaum was talking about at the time, but there's also support for the BeagleBoard XM. And I think maybe the BeagleBone White as well, because there's a table matrix for the feature support. Yeah.
Any more questions?
More remark, part of the problem with working with the Minix folks was a lot of the package source and NetBSD borrowing related people were researchers working on their PhD or things like that. And once those contracts basically run out, the continuity was lost. And that's basically why that was one half. The other half was there was never much interest from the Minix side of things to move things back into package source. We did try, but it wasn't very successful.
And from the glance that I got from some of the vague changes in the repository, it's not exactly the done thing in terms of the way that you would do changes. There's a lot of kind of if-def Minix, blah. Yeah.
Any more questions? So no. So thanks a lot, Simon, for his talk.
Thank you.
So I think we will have a short 5-minute break and happy to announce an additional talk. I really don't know the title yet.
Oh, it's a short presentation about Magit.
Okay, it's a short presentation about Magit.
So is that okay? Still a bit. Sounds, well, I guess I can manage with that. No bit? Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. Christoph. Or Chris. Yeah.
Okay, then I would like to announce the next talk from Chris. The talk was about Git things,
About
right?
Magit.
Magit, right.
Magit. So there's two things I've been told that you don't do when you give a talk. One is you don't do a live demo, and the other one is you bring, you have to have slides. So I'm not having slides, and I'm doing a live demo. Who is not using Git here? Not using, okay. Who is using Git front ends here? A front end, GUI front end, something like Git. Sometimes. What are you using? Git GUI, okay. Okay, we all love Git, don't we? Where am I? Where's my... so this is also being prepared. I don't know where. Is this going to the side? Yes. So, we all love Git, and I need to find... Where's my pointer? I can't see it from here. Under the black thingy. Oh, no, it is here. Damn it. Yeah, I have too many. Yeah, probably have to do that. Mirror the display. And hide my windows. Okay, so Git. Hope you can hear this. Go full screen, please. And
so to understand why, let me show you a high-level picture of how Git works. Yeah? Does that all make sense? Did you see how all those simple concepts came together to form a cohesive whole? Well, if that didn't make sense, pray tell, then look at it like this. Git is basically a confusing movie about time travel and parallel dimensions, and then you have to put your source code in that movie. So Git essentially provides Donnie Darko as a service.
so thank you, James Mickens. If you haven't seen any of his talks, you're missing out. So something I discovered last year for work, Magit. Magit is a front end for Git in Emacs, and when I'm done, you're all going to be Emacs fanboys and Emacs fangirls. It will improve your life so much. So it's easy to configure, easy to install. It's actually an Emacs package, and Emacs has a relatively decent package manager, so you can update it. It's relatively easy. So let's start with cloning a Git repo. I have to pick a random repo, git clone, and what is that? No, I see HD. Do I still have it here? No, it is not. This is why you don't do live presentation. Something I needed a while ago. It asks you where to clone it to. Who knows about remote push default? Very useful. This is when you do where it goes. If you just do a git push, where it is going to push to. So we want this. We want this. And then you have the Git buffer. It is actually in there. You have some, you know what the head is, you know where it's going to merge in, you know where it's going to push in. You have the recent commits with history. You can navigate easily. You can look what the commit log is. You can go in there, something like this. You can open it. You get a temporary buffer with all the changes. How's that? Does it go to the file? Doesn't go to the file. So navigating is actually really easy. You can fold it and see what the changes are. This is very, very, very easy for me. So the actual nice thing is everything, if you're in this buffer, you need 2 keystrokes to get into this buffer, and every command you really need is 2 keystrokes away. Like, we're going to make a branch. So that's B for branch, and do a checkout. This is okay. No, create a new branch, so I create a new branch. That is a good name. Sorry, branch, new, like starting point, master, yeah. You should read it, you have good interaction. So now you're on that, and branch checkout. You're going to, no, we don't got branch. Checkout new branch. I'm going to switch branches. Yep, so branch, and we need to do some commits. Random files, lib. What do we have? RDF, query. So we need to do some random changes. What is that? Random comment. So git status. We have unstaged changes. You can look at the changes, and you can also stage them. But something more. Print hello, some debugging statement. So we still have changes, but we now have 2 hunks. It's easy to navigate, and then now you have the option. You can just stage this hunk, commit, random, change 1, CC, and you can stage and commit that. You can also, if you don't stage anything, it asks you if you want to commit all the changes. Change to CC. Okay. So now I have 2 changes, and I can say, let me see. Come on. You can push, pull it, merge it into a branch. This is also easy. It goes like, let's see. Open the menu. There you have all the commands inside there, and can push, and can set it, go to upstream to push default. It handles that. If you have set it up, it handles that very, very nicely. I find that very easy, and what I also use often is rebasing, interactive rebase. You have this, and for example, you can move this up. I have to first select one, so I'm going to select this one. I'm still in rebasing mode. CC. So I'm going to move that. What is it doing? Sorry. Come on, rebase, interactive. So. Yep. You move that down, move that up. It's as easy as that. Comment it out. There's actually a user interface in there, and it can commit it. CK, yes, I don't want to make any changes, and I don't want to push to that repo. I don't know if I have it actually probably done. So this is a real lifesaver for me in the last year when I have to do a lot of work with this stuff. And it's really reason to start learning Emacs again after, I don't know, 20 years or so. Yeah. So last one to use Maggot is a Linux user. Any questions? Yeah.
Is there a Mars CVS?
A?
Mars CVS.
Mars CVS. No, there is no Mars CVS, and there's also no Mar HG. There is something that is called Monkey, which was branched in, I think, 2011, and had some commits recently, but not many. And I'm not sure how it's updated with Maggot. Maggot is actually maintained. There's the developer got funding via Kickstarter, I think, so he's actually being able to develop full-time on it. So it's very nice, and they have frequent releases and frequent bug fixes. One more time. I have to do it the hard way now. Process buffer. Come on. Well, it actually, so what I wanted to show you is the process buffer where it actually records the Git commands that it is running. So you can go through the menus, which is very quick, much quicker than if you do use the command line. But you can look at the process log and see what actually the commands were that it was using. So you actually can start learning about Git. Supports everything: cherry picking, going to the history, selecting these chunks and so on is very easy. Also very regular. Yeah.
So on a more serious note, I'm actually interested in learning Emacs as well. So.
Yeah.
As a newcomer learning Emacs who doesn't really know Emacs, how much of a learning curve is it to take on both? Because of your demo, you were kind of talking about your intentions.
Yeah,
yeah.
So when you start up Emacs with new, you get a nice helpful screen, and you can start a tutorial. I think it's Control-H, Control-T, and then you start to the Emacs tutorial, which you can really go through with the basics, and it's really good. And it has a really extensive manual, so it's quite easy.
And once I know these shortcuts, then the workflow for the Margit is easy, or do I then?
No, it's very easy. So it's basically you need to. You started with. So meta-x is a prefix for invoking extensions. So it's meta-x, meta-g to start the measured interface. We get a pop-up menu there, navigating around that. And if you want to have the status of your buffer or of your working tree, then it's Control-X-G, I think. I can type it, I don't remember it, and then you're in there and you have the menu. That's really easy. You can also use the mouse to move anything around and have menus. I actually disable the menus because I want to use the keyboard more.
Any more questions? So thanks to Chris for his talk.
Well, thank you.
normally we should use the microphones here because it's better for the recording, but I think for the closing session it's not a huge deal, and just close the session. Hey, hey. We can actually stand on the stage.
Oh yeah.
Because we have no slides, so we are the slides now. So
The
thanks
best
everyone
slides.
for showing up. I hope you had a good day. It was a very intense day, full of talks. Actually, if you have one more talk, it's your chance now. I think we could pack another short one, but otherwise we will actually tear down for today, which means you can rest, relax, go outside for a drink or do whatever you want until the dinner plan, where you are all invited to join the SPUD. If you need the address again or any detail in information, just get back to us. We can organize a group departure if necessary. Only thing is that the three of us are going to have to clean up everything here, move all of the tables away, get the microphones back in the boxes, cameras and so on. But other than that, of course, you're free to help, but you're also free to do whatever you want. And hopefully we see us around the burger, some drinks. Tomorrow, the plan is to show up here again from 10 a.m. on, but there is no strict schedule because there is no talk planned. So it's just like hacking day.
Or maybe someone has something prepared till tomorrow for a short talk
Surprise.
or demo session or whatever.
Svan suggested that maybe I may talk about both, like introductory level stuff, and I just wanted to gauge like how much interested people.
Sure.
Sure.
So should we say 11? Okay,
Yeah,
so
perfect.
tomorrow morning, 11 a.m., talk about force from Uwe. Thank you, Uwe. And otherwise, yeah, hope to see you this evening. Oh yeah, maybe one more thing.
Thank you for coming.
Please bring your badge this evening at the restaurant, just in case, so that they can identify us easily for the free or for the offer with the burger and drink. It will be easier for them, and it's not like everybody will know your name because it's not written if you haven't put it. If you're sensible to that, and I think otherwise that's it.
Yeah, so see you around, I would say. And if you have any questions, I think we are here.